On today's show, we are joined by Toni and Janelle, who are the hosts of the Every Temple podcast. This is a really cool episode because we're diving in to the history, stories, and symbolism of various temples across the earth. We're going to Johannesburg, to Germany, to Gilbert, Arizona, and we're going to be talking about how in the construction of these temples, we learn about the stories of the saints and how we're all connected as children of God. We also learn the correlation between how our 5 covenants that we receive in our endowment are related in the construction of these temples in a way that will change the way that you look at your temple. Enjoy the show. What you guys do that's so unique and special is you dive into something I've always been fascinated with, which is more of like how the spirit of the temple is found in the history of the temple, in the details of the building itself. Like, there's so much effort that goes into these buildings and they never get appreciated until your show came around, right? Like there's this concept of like people go individually and they fall in love with their individual temple, but we're a global church. And what about these people in Africa? How are they going to learn about the Johannesburg Temple like was on your show? Like there's just all these incredible things. So yeah, I'm excited that we're talking for sure.
It's learning about, it's so many things. It's learning about the history of the buildings, but it's also learning about the people that are part of that history and the prophets that are part of that history as well. We find them intertwined in each of these stories as well. And it's kind of a church history, a modern church history, because we know a lot about Restoration church history, but we don't know what's going on in the 80s. We don't know what's, how did we end up here?
So you're really like marking the history of the development of God's church on the earth in latter days through the development of the temples.
It's really interesting. That's like one of the things that I'm really enjoying is learning the history of how the gospel came to different countries and the missionary work that goes on in other countries. And I've said this a few times, but the global histories on the church website is like so great. And there's so many inspirational stories, and it's just really neat to learn how missionary work has started all around the world.
Every temple podcast, it's this marker of history over time, and it's through the people, but it's using these at temples. Because like you said, we get so excited when those temples are announced and everyone cheers to the point where like the brethren, I almost wonder if they stopped doing that recently because we're all kind of culturally taking this and running with it. But yeah, I love that you guys are using this as an opportunity to really mark the path. Because it's like as we look backwards, we can feel that inspiration. And as we look forwards, realize, man, there's so much more we can do. Yeah. What have you guys learned as far as your own temple worship and his service goes? What have you guys learned by doing this podcast?
Oh, so much.
I think it adds to what I already know and helps me appreciate what I already know more fully. And like just the symbolism of a few different temples being like a beacon or a North Star, it just solidifies to me that, this is what is guiding me through my life is the temple.
The more you learn about the details of the people in the temple and their history, the more you just are confirmed in what you already know, that this is the path. It's a reassurance.
Yeah. And I think if I'm going to a place like traveling or visiting something that somebody thinks is important, I want to know why they think it's important. And not, I mean, obviously the inside of the temple is always the same. And we don't want to cheapen that at all. Elder Bednar's kind of been a thorn in our side about, it's not about the building, it's about what happens inside. And we get that. But it helps me to be more interested in the place if I know the history and if I know why it was built and why it was built there and who helped build it and who designed it and all those things.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I bet Elder Bednar would actually be on the same page with you on that, because there is so much attention to detail that goes into these buildings and the people. And it's more about the people, why they chose those decisions, right? Like in the Gilbert Temple is a really cool, it's my temple. Like if you ask me what my favorite temple is, it's Gilbert Temple because it's the one closest to my home and therefore my heart since I frequent it. And inside it, they use the agave plant. Okay. The agave plant was specifically chosen in all the different elements symbolically because of various reasons. And one of them is that the agave plant has these overlapping leaves. Structurally and visually, it's a very cool reminder of the family of God centering on the Trinity. And then when you go into the celestial room, there's vases and pots that are made to look like agave plants. And then the windows are these really cool, like long strips of glass that have leaves that intertwine. And it reminds me of family and connection and the desert that I live in. It reminds me of all these things. So yeah, I think there's something special about that because again, the people who live near the temple will relate to that symbolism as very personal to them. And I think that's the point, is that these things are created. So when we travel, there's a chance to kind of get to know the saints in different parts of the world by doing that. Have you guys gone to as you guys have done these episodes on their temples, have you gone and visited them and learned about these people?
Well, it turns out Janelle's been to every temple already. She's either been there or...
Wait, is that a literal comment, Janelle? Janelle, you've been to all the temples or a lot?
But she just comes out with, oh yeah, I've been to the Tokyo Temple. I was like, what? Like, that's crazy. And
It
then
makes it sound like I'm a world traveler, and I'm totally not.
she's like, yeah, I've walked around the Seattle Temple. Like, what? When did you do that? Anyway.
Well, let's talk about the Tokyo Temple for a
Okay.
minute. Let's talk about that just for a beat, because that's part of what I know my audience is going to want to hear about. So yeah, let's dive in. You did a whole episode on the Tokyo Temple. What were some of the key elements on that temple that are kind of unique or fun to know?
Yeah.
Well, I haven't been there, but what I really love is that it's across the street from a giant like nature preserve. And so my husband and son were there last month, and they took a video of them walking home from church through that preserve and then coming out and facing the temple. And I thought that was amazing. And then next to the temple, they have a beautiful little fountain with, what were they called? The Japanese lanterns
Yeah.
that connect heaven and earth.
Yeah.
That's what they symbolize.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say, was like that lantern there is connecting the heaven to the earth and the generations in our families. And it's just another symbolism and reminder of what the temple is. And the fact that the Tokyo Temple is like in the middle of a city, there's a nature preserve right beside it, but there's like lots of like wires, like pictures you see of the Tokyo Temple are photoshopped. They Photoshop all the wires out, and it's in the middle of a city. But once you get on the grounds there, it's just so peaceful and quiet. It's like a miracle that it's such a the temple, just the grounds themselves bring peace even in the midst of all that's going on around it. So
Yes, Tokyo is the largest city in the world by far. And I had the privilege of being at the Tokyo Temple last year, and it was an interesting experience for all those reasons. The nature preserve, how it lends to this rest in the middle of the chaos feel. And that fountain is very special. And I know what you're talking about. It's a very small fountain, but when you're standing in front of it and you're listening to the water as it trickles down and you see these Japanese figures, the lantern and the connection between heaven and earth, you feel connected to the Japanese people. Like it's neat because, Mark Twain said it. Travel, I'm going to butcher this quote, but travel is the cure for racism or prejudice or whatever he said, because when you travel and you spend time with other cultures, you see yourself in them. And what's cool about the temples and these histories that you guys do is it allows us to feel and see the history and our connection as children of God to them, not just as human beings, as eternal sons and daughters of Heavenly Father. And so when we go to the temple there, we had the chance to go do some baptisms inside. And when I went with my 3 boys. The Japanese culture is incredibly punctual. They are very formal, very kind to a fault. The way I describe it is that if 4 people came to the stop sign at the same time, no one's moving, because no one's going to, like, everyone's like, no, you go, like very kind. And I mean that as a joke. They're just the most loving people. When you go into the baptism font, they are ready for you on time, and they are very structured on how you operate. And the whole feel helped me feel closer to God. I think it expanded for me the connection that I had to my brothers and sisters in a way that made me feel more of a human, this global family, that the way I think any parent would want their kids to feel connected to.
Yeah. Yeah. And learning, like, those people go to the temple just like we do. Like, they learn the same things and make the same covenants and make promises that we make as well. It's the same gospel, and they are people, and they are children of God.
And they're all, every time, the people are just so excited and thankful to have a temple built in their area. And it's just the same every time. And I love the unity that the temple brings. Like, yeah, we're all children of God. Everybody has the same purpose when it comes to the temple. And we're just unified in that purpose. And I really love it.
Yeah, again a connecting piece and tool for us, and we don't have to go travel and see the temples, but there is value in like making that initiative,
Yeah,
right?
I think people talk a lot about like when I was born, we could have visited every temple, but now it's impossible. I mean, we don't, visiting every temple has minimal value, but if you want to learn about every temple, sure, that's great.
Because you're learning about the human, God's
Yeah,
family
you're
as
learning
you go.
more this way than if we had traveled the world to go visit every temple. Like that just sounds like a lot of rental cars and hotel rooms.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll do it.
I have a question for you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, travel's so fun for those who love it. For those who don't, not so
Yeah.
much. But for you guys, let me ask you, what's a temple and episode that you did that surprised you? Like, what was a temple that you learned about that was just like, wow, that's really eye opening?
I really liked the Freiberg Germany
Yeah,
Temple.
yeah,
I think they're behind, like, I think there's so much more that goes on behind some of these temples than we can find information for. And
Huh.
Freiberg was one where it was in East Germany in before the wall was taken down, and people kept trying to leave to go to the temple, and the government wouldn't let them. And they got sick of them trying to get visas to leave to go to the temple, that they're like, why don't you just build a temple here? And
duh.
I'm like, no, I don't think anybody even thought to ask. I don't think anybody thought they would have said yes, but they offered to have the temple built there. And that is such a huge miracle. And just the whole miracle of what, I don't remember the man's name, but he did a lot of work trying to help people get to the temple, just talking to government officials about what the temple is, and just so many miracle after miracle after miracle, and the forgiveness and love that he would have had to have against for these government officials, and it's it's a miracle so layered.
For sure.
When did that happen? So let me make sure I got the story right. So there was a temple that existed in East Germany. Was this prior to World War
No.
II?
So this is
So this
1983, 82,
Oh, I see.
right?
Yeah, and the wall came down in like
90 or
yeah,
89.
yeah,
So, yeah, they were trying to just get out. They had the gospel, but they couldn't get to the temple because it was in Switzerland.
yeah.
And so,
Oh, I see. So they're in East. They're in East Germany with the wall, and they're members of the church trying to get to Switzerland to go to the temple, and that was just driving the government officials. That's what you were
yes.
saying,
Yes,
Janelle.
sorry.
No.
Like, oh no, this is for me. I'm sure the
Yeah.
audience is following, but it's a matter of like, so they were just the government's like, why don't we just build one here? So are you saying that the church built a temple in East Germany before the wall came
Yes.
down?
Oh, 85.
I
It was
didn't know
85.
that.
Okay.
Because I said it was the year I was born.
Ah.
So,
And now half my audience feels super old. No, I'm just kidding. But like, so they built this temple in East Germany, and then that is fascinating. Keep going.
oh, well, it was Brother Burkhart. He was like the mission president, but he was kind of the de facto leader of the church in East Germany. Like that's who they government recognized as the president of the church. And he just did so many things. And then they found like a city that was willing to accept another temple or a temple. One city was just like, no, no, thank you. We'll make this so hard for you that it will not be worth it. And so they found Freiburg, which was so happy to have another place of
Yeah,
worship.
they were
They,
having a
they
celebration of
were
some sort.
about to celebrate like 900 years of being a city.
Yeah.
And they were like, this can be part of it. And then they found a location that was beautiful and just happened to have a freeway built next to it later on. And it was the government was offering the land so cheap that the church doubled it.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
It was
Um,
going to
You
go, the
doubled the
money was
size of the
going,
purchase, or They gave them twice as much as they asked,
Well,
is
the
what you're
money was
saying?
going to some private citizens, but it was being sold by the government. I don't know how that works, but they said it'll be this many cents per acre, and the church was like, we'll just double that because that doesn't seem fair at all.
Yeah.
But it was still like only a few $1,000s.
Yeah.
The acreage for the temple cost in the thousands of, like low
Yeah,
thousands of
yeah.
dollars.
I want to say like 12.
Wow.
It could have been. Yeah.
And then they worked to get natural gas instead of a coal plant. I mean, it was just a whole thing. The hardest temple to build, I bet, next to Salt Lake.
Well, yeah, I think building a temple in East Germany before the Berlin Wall came down had to have been an incredible challenge, but it's interesting how the Lord worked. In you know, it's listen, I don't believe that correlation is causation in every case, but it's interesting to note that I think it was 4 years later, in 1989, was when the Berlin Wall collapses. So you have the gospel and the temple are in on the other side of the wall, and then shortly thereafter that wall
And
collapses.
they were so sure that at some point the temple would be raided, that it would be illegally, well, like illegally searched, that the Gestapo or whatever, the police would come in and try and, what's the word I'm...
Yeah, go through all the rooms they're not supposed to go
Yeah,
through to look
exactly. That they would,
for
and
contraband or
so
yeah.
the church was not sure that they should build a whole temple. They were like, what if we just built an endowment house like Salt Lake had for a long time? If it gets broken into in some way, then they can still use the room if it's attached to a branch building or something. They could still use the space, and then yeah, but it never has happened. Never, that never happened.
It never
No.
did.
No, I
Wow.
think that the brother did a really good job at working with the government, explaining everything. And I think that they obviously weren't afraid that we were doing illegal stuff. I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did. He was told years before that by President Kimball that if he could forgive these bureaucrats, these officials, then they would um, open doors for the church and they would make things happen. And so it took him several years to forgive and accept them as children of God. And then when he did that, they came around and they, helped him facilitate building this temple.
So he was promised that if he could forgive these government officials, and so he had, I mean, isn't that
It's
powerful?
so, yeah.
Because I can only imagine what those government officials, what he had seen government officials, maybe not those exact ones,
Sure.
but government officials had done over the last, who knows,
Hmm.
decades. You
Yeah.
know, this is a person who watched, if they weren't there during the actual war and the fallout afterwards, they were definitely part of the aftermath for decades where that type of control was exerted. And so I can only imagine. It's interesting the spiritual lesson I'm learning right now as I hear you guys talk about that story of how we have to have forgiveness before we can receive the blessings, the relief, the peace, and the connection to God that we need. That's a very literal representation of that concept. He had to forgive those government officials so that generations could be blessed on both sides of the
Yeah.
veil because the temple was built afterwards.
Yeah. It's very powerful.
Yeah. Did you say it took him a couple years to
Yeah.
do? Yeah. I can't imagine what it would have been like for him because that's scary. It's really scary when somebody has like a power and control over your life. And depending on how you act and stuff, it will depend on how, I don't know. I can't imagine living that way. And that really would have taken a lot of faith for him. That was,
Oh
yeah.
my, more than I have to be able to have the ability to forgive someone while you're still under their direct control, and who
Yeah.
knows what those how his family had suffered or people he'd lost or been or anyway. So I'm very grateful for that story. That's the kind of thing that I think is so beautiful about your podcast. When you learn about the history of these temples, it really is this where it's kind of where that temple and family history meet together, right? When you learn about the history of the temple and the history of the people, you're learning both about temple covenants and family history, and they interlock there in those
Yeah.
histories. I love that. Is there another story from another temple that was impactful for you guys?
I don't know if this one will count, but I do want to say that Seoul, South Korea, had a similar story. They were not allowed to leave the country to go to the temple. Their nearest temple would have been Tokyo or before that, Hawaii. And they just were not, after the Korean War, they were not allowed to leave. And so having a temple built there, they didn't have as many, I mean, we didn't see the evidence of as much red tape, but they were not allowed to leave until,
Yeah.
and so that's why they built the temple there.
And that was, it wasn't because of a communist government. It was more just, they were trying to recover from a war.
Yeah.
And they didn't want their people leaving the country. And so, yeah.
So the saints again were requesting the temple, and so the solution was for the church to put one in Seoul. By the way, that's the same year, I just looked it up, it was 1985, the same year that the East German Temple was built.
So we've just studied both of those recently, and so those are fresh. But there's been so many good stories from temples, and
there's a lot of inspirational stories. I mean, I tried going through my past notes. I mean, there's always inspirational stories of people donating and fundraising. Like, I think it was Sao Paulo. A man took his gold bridge out of his mouth to donate
and
the
handed
gold.
it to the missionaries.
Yep.
Wow.
And the missionaries were like, no thanks. And he's like, don't deny me blessings. This is my donation. And so what the missionaries did is they told Elder Faust about it. And he said, I'll just buy it. And he kept that bridge in his office as a symbol to remind him of the sacrifice of the saints.
Yeah.
Wow. Speaking of sacrifice, what are some examples of sacrifice that you guys have learned about in different temples of what people have had to do to make temples happen?
So far in our research, the members are always asked to donate and fundraise in every temple. And so even like Kirtland, Nauvoo, there's penny drives, and then the Logan, I think, was a nickel drive, and Manti was a 50-cent drive, and temple eggs.
Yeah.
The sisters would save their eggs that were laid on Sunday, and I don't know if they would donate the money from those eggs. I'm not sure.
Selling them or something, yeah.
We're not sure how that worked, but the temple eggs they came up a couple times. The Jordan River Temple was completely funded by members for several years. The maintenance and everything, the construction, the maintenance, the land was donated, and it's one of the biggest temples in the world.
Yeah, some of these poorer countries too, they asked members to donate money. And so members would sell things or prolong buying things or doing other things and to donate their money to build these temples. And even they were, a man didn't eat lunch for a year and donated the money that he would have spent on lunch.
Wow.
And a woman stopped smoking and donated the money she would have spent on cigarettes.
Yeah.
And just lots.
Everything. In one of the island nations, this was to go to the temple.
Yeah.
A lot of people are sacrificing to get to the temple.
Yeah.
So they wanted to go to the temple so badly, they sold everything in their home and the construction materials for their home.
Yeah.
Went to the temple and came back and started from scratch. But then a hurricane hit and everybody lost everything. And so they said, well, at least we may have lost everything as well, but at least we got our temple covenants taken care of. So everybody was starting over at that point.
It's amazing the connection I'm learning right now between sacrifice and temple. Mm-hmm. It's a law. Yeah. It's one of the covenants we make is the covenant, the law of sacrifice, or as we have heard in a previous episode, the love of sacrifice. Why do you guys think in all these cases, church members are asked to sacrifice or have had to sacrifice in order to get the temple even present? Why do you think that has been a consistent theme in all your research?
I think it's just to make them feel that they're part of it. One boy in Manti or something, he said, I paid my nickel for the nickel drive, and I would like to touch the temple. They were under construction. And so the man picked him up and put him on the scaffold so he could see the work that was happening. They need to be part of it in some way. And I think, I hesitate to say it, but I think that may be something we're missing these days, is that what are we sacrificing for our temples?
So you're saying there's more meaning behind that because they sacrificed, and you said ownership,
Yeah.
like that's my temple because I contributed to that.
Also, I mean, the church didn't have the funds like they do now. Like, they didn't have the funds to build these big, beautiful structures everywhere around the world, and so they needed the fundraising at the time, which is not the case anymore. So,
Yep.
I mean, that's just logistically, but
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's powerful because when I've never seen this parallel before, but the five covenants that we make when we receive our endowments are present in their cyclic. Like we go through these over and over, we learn and we grow. Through repentance, we're always correcting our path. And that's exactly how these journeys go for building the temples as well. So whether we're building a life dedicated to the Savior to be constructed like metaphorically as types of saviors to become like him, so does the same process exist in the building of these temples. And they're the same concepts. Obedience. We believe that there's a prophet of the Lord saying, here's where we should build the next temple. Sacrifice. Members are asked to donate. Members are asked to give their time and energy. And in the early temples, Salt Lake, they're actually physically, the members are actually building them themselves. And all the way to consecration, where people are pulling bridges of gold out of their mouth. They're giving everything they've been given in some shape or form to the building, the establishment of Zion. Yeah. And so it's a pretty powerful concept to think about these covenants as just as like gravity. They just exist. And whenever we want to draw closer to Christ and construct our lives or a temple, it follows a similar path.
Yeah, that's true.
So my next question was like, obviously there's been challenges in building those temples. You mentioned the Berlin temple was a temple that the East German temple. That temple had incredible challenges. Is there any other challenges you can think of from your research that have occurred that were significant in the establishment of some of those temples?
Yeah.
Maybe even the earlier one?
Philippines. So
the Manila, which one?
Manila.
The Manila one?
So like they were able to build it, but and it was dedicated. I should have read through the whole story, but they were having problems with the government and militant groups, and
there was a coup.
Yeah.
And the military kind of used
in the government there was a coup during the development of the temple.
It was after it was built. It was like in the 90s or early 2000s. Okay. But they were one of the groups, maybe the rebels, was camped, if not next to the temple,
like across the street.
Yeah.
Oh, and yeah.
And then they were going to use some of the temple president came out and begged them, like, don't come in the temple, but you can use any of the other buildings. Wow. And so they did or didn't, and yeah. I mean, they were fully prepared for the temple to be blown up, bombed.
Yeah, because there was bombs, there was bullets, there was lots of like war type stuff going on right on and around the temple grounds, and I think that they only got like one bullet hole or something.
Yeah.
But it was a miracle that the building was not entered by people and that it wasn't destroyed at all.
Yeah.
Truly. So I've been to Manila, and I will tell you, I know exactly that revolution, the coup that you're talking about, because I stayed at a hotel nearby, and then the hotel preserved these planks where not just some bullets, but like many bullets had been entered, because there was so much occupying of buildings for safety from both sides. And so the entire city, they would choose the bigger, nicer buildings to protect themselves in. And is there a better, more beautiful building than the temple? Of course not. And for it to never be, see, these are the things that, like, when you hear on the outside of someone who's not sure about our faith, they're like, yeah, that's just a really good coincidence. Mm-hmm. But as my son says on his mission, after so many significant coincidences, you have to start questioning if there's not something else going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that building never got invaded.
Yeah. And yeah, the miracles that happen on every temple, it's amazing. And like, yeah, you know that it's not just by chance. Oh, it was the London Temple right before the open house. They had a big rainstorm.
Yeah,
And
and it was flooding the basement.
yeah,
And so you've got President Hinckley in his pajamas and the temple president and the mission president down there bucketing water out of the stairwell to just so they could have the open house. Or was it the dedication? Anyway, one of
it
those
could,
days that it
yeah,
was going to open,
yeah.
the night before, those were the men that were doing the work.
Was President Hinckley
No,
prophet at the
he
time?
was not even an apostle. He was on the temple committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're sitting there like just, so people, critics of the church would look at that and go, well, come on, if this is a temple of the Lord, why would God let it rain the night before and fill the basement? What would you guys say about that?
That they are temples made by men. I mean, the Samoa
Stuff happens.
the Apia Samoa temple burned down. But here's
Yeah.
the miracle. The angel Moroni did not burn. It did not melt. And it's made of fiberglass. Like, if you look at the pictures, the flames went all the way up. It burned everything. But the Moroni was fine and reusable. They
Yeah.
reused it on the new temple.
Yeah.
It's the temples are not going to be perfectly protected, but pretty much they are. I mean,
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And what happens inside is what's important, right? And that the outside isn't, it is sacred, but I guess like Elder Bednar said,
it's what happens inside. It's the covenants
yeah.
that make a difference.
Yeah. Well, and what is a temple? A temple is nothing more than a physical construct to house a spiritual experience where the Spirit of the Lord can dwell. All a temple is a physical construct where the Spirit of the Lord can dwell. I just want to say that really loudly for the audience because our bodies are temples, and our bodies, are they not fraught with challenge?
Right.
Do we not face disease? And, whereas a physical building experiences natural disaster, do we not experience disease and limitation? Do we not experience physical pain? Do we not go through those elements? If anything, we should take comfort in seeing how the physical temples and the opening and all these elements play in to causing challenge for the saints for our good.
Yeah.
The more we sacrifice, the more we love. The more, so those things don't happen. It could be argued that God allowed the flooding to happen in that temple so that those saints have an opportunity to remember what it's like to physically put their hands on buckets because they love God and bail that water out the way the Savior bails us out spiritually. It's all in that faith piece. And I think it's amazing as you guys learn about the temples, as you're talking about it, how I feel like I'm learning about what goes on inside more by understanding those physical challenges and those elements that the people experience in building them. What were some of when we think about the temples in the early days, is there anything that stands out with those early temples in terms of either the challenges or like what is, after all your history? Because I've obviously we spent some time learning in the Doctrine and Covenants about, the earliest temples. And modern day temples, it feels like that was a very special time in the development of those temples. What can you say about that?
I will just say that our earliest episodes are not our best. So maybe at some point we need to go
Of your podcast.
re-record Kirtland and Nauvoo. But those temples, because I just don't think we emphasize the miracles that happened.
I agree.
The miracles that happened in those temples, we didn't know what we were doing and how to present those things, but they were really amazing. Christ came to Kirtland, and Nauvoo was just so elemental in their growth and progression. And it was just, they were miracles that they were built, and then they had to walk away from them, and that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and seeing like the Kirtland Temple was built to bring to restore the full keys of the priesthood, and the Nauvoo Temple, it was built for people to get their own endowments, but also they started learning about the baptism for the dead, and that was so exciting to them that they're like, we can save our ancestors too, and that is just a miracle.
And they just ran to the river.
Yeah. And they started going to the river and just doing baptisms for the dead for their ancestors, and starting to do the family history search, asking their relatives, what are the names of all our ancestors? And then in St. George, when they started doing like endowments for for their ancestors, like the evolution of it, and them having to make
Oh,
a
like
script,
yeah,
a script of what happens in the endowment, and just like the evolution of the temple itself
yeah,
and the ceremony, like, and then they go from doing live performances to making a video. And we talk about that in the episodes where they transition from temples where they have live narration to,
video.
yeah. And it's actually really cool seeing the evolution of the temple.
Yeah,
I love, when you say evolution, I hear restoration.
Yes.
Like there's those are two identical words in my
yeah,
mind. Evolution, restoration, evolution, because I think, again, when we think about the way we all initially think about God and creation, we think of it as this like precise engineer on a blueprint measuring and what's funny is I'm betting that's still true, but the way we experience it in mortality is
yeah,
messy. Building and constructing and building these things, it's a messy experience. And so as we are receiving revelation and evolving, I love that part of our church being that it's being restored. It hasn't been restored. It's being restored as we speak. Revelation is one of our foundational beliefs, so that as those early saints come in, it's one of the greatest testimony strengtheners for me is thinking about how these early saints, so young in this new era of the gospel of Jesus Christ, are coming together and they are sacrificing everything just to be a member when the world wasn't wealthy, when the lifestyle that people experienced was, by all means, by today's standard, the extremities of poor. We're told to and now you're supposed to do these buildings. You're supposed to create extra sacrifice to build these buildings. And so they do, because they feel it in their hearts and they choose to have faith in what they can't see, what they couldn't see back then, especially as they were walking away from Kirkland,
Yeah.
Nauvoo. They couldn't see a day where you and I get to stand together and look at 300 plus temples dotting the earth, representing all humanity, all of God's children. They couldn't have possibly have known, but they had felt. And so they worked and sacrificed nonetheless. Again, going back to those covenants of sacrifice, obedience. They obeyed because they loved.
yeah,
Yeah.
And they sacrificed all so that you and I could have everything that we have now in our temples everywhere around the world.
And I see that like every time we do a podcast, the people are just so excited to do things for their ancestors, just like the pioneers. The excitement is still the same, that they realize they can go and do these ordinances for their ancestors, and it's still exciting.
yeah,
It is so cool how it's just, again, it's been revealed little by little, precept upon precept over time. And I can only imagine what it was like for them on that first, line upon line, the first line, go build a
right.
temple.
Yeah, and
What?
not knowing what they're gonna get from it. They're just like told some vague promises about power and glory, and they're like,
Right.
okay, but
And they
that's
just knew.
just
They
the
just
level of
knew.
faith that they had.
Yeah, it's amazing.
When our recent trip to Africa, we had the privilege of going to the Johannesburg Temple, and that was an interesting history to learn about. And it reminded me, as I met with people in these orphanages who have just had the worst version of hell. There is no hell that we could ever imagine that isn't actually experienceable here in Earth, and these people had gone through it, the most vile, horrible experiences you can imagine. And for them, they they are the most loving and kind, and they praise God more than anyone else. Like, it's just, they see the beauty in all things. And the temple is like this beacon of hope, this light on a hill. And I keep reminding myself that, like, as we go to the temple, what a privilege it is to have it the way that we have it. I just hope I never take that for granted. You know what I mean? Like, there's just the way that people have had to sacrifice for years and go through horrible experiences. Now, real quick, before we wrap up, I do have to ask you about the Johannesburg Temple. Do you guys have any thoughts on that
You have
temple
some
that you would
fun
like to share?
facts.
'Cause that was a
Well, I
special.
want to ask you, did you see
Please.
they say they have a Nauvoo temple stone at the
Oh
front
yeah.
gate, but we couldn't find it on any pictures. We don't know how big, we don't know anything about it. There's a Nauvoo temple stone somewhere on a gate at the Johannesburg Temple.
Hey,
Original Nauvoo. So that was cool. It's the first temple that's made with brick on the exterior. So we often end up with more questions at the end of a podcast than
Yeah.
we have answers for. And so that's one of them. And then,
the question being if where the Nauvoo
yeah.
stone
So,
is, and
so we,
Yeah.
do
you know,
you know that there's a stone from the original Nauvoo temple at the Johannesburg
yeah.
Temple
And
in
how did it
Africa?
get there? And why did they include
Oh,
it in a
wow.
gate? And, you know, I we are so comfortable with asking questions.
Yeah.
You don't always know everything.
Yeah.
But Johannesburg is really pretty. Did you notice the neighborhood around it? Is it like a wealthy, safe? Like how would you describe it?
Not those
Oh,
things. It was. I mean, maybe it was for that area, but we went over at night. And we were doing some charity work in Mozambique, and we were coming back in a car at night with my boys, and I was getting scared. And then in that area, I felt safe. Like we were waiting for our Uber back to our hotel. I didn't feel nervous, but getting there at least was pretty scary. And there, I couldn't really tell you because it was so
yeah.
dark.
Okay, that makes sense. Um, Anything else about Johannesburg? Yeah, it's the first one with brick on the exterior. First temple to have brick.
Yes,
And um,
first one in Africa
yeah,
too.
first
Really
African
special.
temple. And it was the most remote temple from any other
Right.
temple and from Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
For a long time, it was very special. This is more selfish. I served my mission in Guatemala City. Is there anything about the Guatemala City temple that stands out to you guys, or the
What I
history,
loved
or
about the
stories?
history is how focused they were on the native populations. And this couple, this couple that started the church down there, they were just like so strong, and they would invite everyone to Sunday school, natives or white people or whoever. And then she is the one that introduced a 3-hour block.
Yeah. Because people had
Yes.
yes. People had to
Because
travel.
back then you were doing sessions throughout
Yeah,
the day,
instead of doing like the
sacrament.
old Sunday method or coming back during the week for primary, whatever, she was like, because they're traveling so much, could we please just have 3 hours of Sunday in a row? So that's where that came from.
Yeah. Because they had people
Oh
traveling
man.
from very far away. And I think this is the one where they traveled like through the rainforest on a boat on the Amazon and to try and get to the
Oh
dedication.
no,
And
not that was
that was a different one?
that was Sao Paulo, but
Oh,
or
sorry.
Peru, because that
Peru.
wouldn't have been the Amazon. But Guatemala was fascinating. The history of
Well,
that.
there everywhere at this point there's people traveling from
Oh.
days to
Yeah.
get to the temple.
It's funny because it's like ice cream. It's all sweet. All the stories are sweet, but the flavors are just a little bit
Exactly.
different. You know, they sacrifice because of the rain in London. They sacrifice for the distance in Guatemala. They sacrifice in different ways in different areas. Especially the earlier saints.
Yeah.
They were the first ones to put the salt in the cream and actually make the ice cream. Like they were all in that space together. And either way, it's a beautiful connective story that tells us the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ through temples is one of the single most beautiful analogies I've heard. So I really appreciate you guys being on the show. And before I go, I'd like to do some rapid fire questions with you guys if you're
Sure.
open for it. Okay, real easy, low hanging fruit. If you had to pick a favorite temple, which was it?
I think we both liked Idaho Falls.
What?
Well, we
I love that temple. It is gorgeous with the river. I just
we
didn't see
did
that coming.
go to Idaho Falls before we recorded our episode, and that's probably the first time or only time we've done that.
Yeah.
We went together to Idaho Falls, but it has the coolest oxen ever.
Yeah.
And
What does that mean?
oh, look at a picture of these oxen. They are phenomenal. They're like brutalist and metallic.
Yeah,
They're so cool.
They're
this
unique.
it's the same sculptor that's done many other things, but on this one he just really I really like it. Janelle really liked the World Room mural.
Yeah, the murals in these older temples are just obviously works of art. They're really amazing. The World Room in the Idaho Falls Temple is like settlers. It's just a depiction of Western
yeah.
settlers,
Pioneers.
and the World Room in the Manti Temple is really magnificent. From Minerva Teichart. I would have to say,
Are you
if I
gonna pick
don't
that
say, I don't know.
You
I
have
have
to
so
say
many
Cardston.
favorites. I have to say Cardston.
Well, she's getting her Canada card revoked.
Because that's where I was married. So
Oh, I love that.
yeah, but it's so hard to pick a favorite
Yeah,
temple.
it is.
Especially doing what you guys do
Yeah.
now for a passion project. You fall in love with every temple a
I
little
mean,
bit.
if we were really professional, we'd say the one we're working on now.
Which
Denver.
is
Denver's
yeah.
great.
Well, there's so many different, nuances to each one. The Mesa Temple was where I grew up coming from Texas. I was in El Paso. We drive 6 hours. The big sacrificial bus ride for 6 hours compared to
Well,
others
I mean, it's not
who
even-
have like hike for days. But yeah, it was like a big thing for us at that time in our stage of life. And it was like they have this beautiful mural inside of Native Americans and Americans coming together. It's just really cool. But guys, I love that answer. What would you guys want so right now, the last thing I want to ask you guys is this. What would you say, this is to your descendants, down the road, your kids are going to be watching this. What would you tell them as to like why you decided to take this project on and why you love the temple so much? Janelle, let's go with you first.
I guess I would say like it is really cool, all that we do and learn, and I really, really love it. But everything that I learn always points me back to what happens inside, and it inspires me to love the temple more and to remember why we go to the temple and to remember those covenants and to keep them. It does point me to Jesus Christ more, and I would hope my descendants would always have a desire to attend the temple.
Love that, Toni.
What I tell my descendants now, by which I mean my children, I say, do you want to know a temple fun fact? And they say, no, we know all the temple fun facts. But no, I think it's just if you love something, you want to learn more about it. And if you love, you just want to do that deep dive of what every temple dedication prayer says and what the prophets are saying and what the prophet picked for this temple or that temple. Is just like, if you are interested in something, you should learn everything you can about it.
Love it, guys. Well, thank you so much for being on Temple Bound. How can people get a hold of your podcast? How do they find you guys?
I think we're searchable everywhere podcasts are. If we're not, please tell us. But we're on YouTube now and Spotify.
Every Temple Podcast.
Yeah,
is the
every
name
Temple
again. Every
Podcast.
Temple Podcast. All right, guys. Thank you so much for being on the show. We sure appreciate you taking some time to be with us.
Thank you.
That was fun.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode of Temple Bound. If you enjoyed today's show, make sure to join us over on Instagram at Temple Bound Podcast to receive additional information as well as previews of our upcoming episodes. See you over there.